Welcome back to another issue.
I'm Table.
I'm Red.
I'm T-Stain.
And it is I, Shino Brando. And in this issue, we talk about the banning of comic books and censorship.
So, when we hear censorship in regards to comic books, I think there is one thing specifically we all think of. So let's acknowledge it right out the bat. The Comics Code. This was, I'll call it a dark time in comic book history, but honestly, it was just a significant portion and it seriously shaped the industry to this day. It's had a bunch of revisions over the year to make it both more and less stupid. But it basically comes down to people went, oh no, comics are corrupting the youth. We need to restrict what's in them. But some books never got past the Comics Code Authority. And hell, some publishers went down when the Comics Code got big because their entire market was books that the Comics Code thought was bad.
Yeah, zombie books, romance books, and such and such.
Vampire books were highly restricted.
The first version said no undead.
Yeah.
Like at all.
You'd be surprised what comic book writers would do to get around comic code authority, man.
I mean, we talked about some of the weirdest ones. Hell, Red brought up the vampire dinosaur guy named Sauron.
Yeah.
So, yeah, comic book writers will get creative to try and quote-unquote comply with the code if they have to.
Yeah.
Though, thankfully, these days they don't.
Well, yeah, that's with the times, right? Things have changed, and there's a lot more that you can throw on the page now that's more socially open, right?
Right.
Compared to, again, the whole conversation of censorship and what that applies to, and, what do you want to censor, and, how much of it do you really apply throughout the years, and what do you remove, right?
Right. So a lot of this conversation stems from the fact that in Tennessee, a Tennessee school board has banned the graphic novel Mouse. And for those unfamiliar with Mouse, because now it's a little harder to get a hold of, but we'll talk about that in a second. It depicts imagery of camps during World War II. And it is a very personal story because the writer's and artist's parent, his dad, was a person that survived the camps.
Yeah, there are a handful of reasons people try to ban stories and ban comic books in particular. And one of them is quote-unquote graphic depictions of violence, of suffering. And while there is a save the children debate to be had about comics that are strictly fictional, where it is just a story, in this particular case, that one doesn't really carry through, does it?
No.
Not even slightly.
No.
Where do you draw the line? Because how is Mouse any different than having your child view, perhaps, I don't know, Saving Private Ryan?
Saving Private Ryan, there's a white savior in that one.
I suppose.
But banning comics isn't new. In the 30s, we had crime books, like your heroes of a time that are just starting to crawl and be the biggest thing literally ever. And they were scared that young kids would go try to be vigilantes.
Children are impressionable, they think.
Yeah.
Not wrong. They are right. But I don't think kids are that stupid to a degree where they're just going to go up and try to solve actual crime, man.
Right.
Yeah, again, in that case, it's almost better to have a certain element of fear, of scary in your comics, because that'll at least impart upon the children that this is serious and not a game.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And in the 50s, we had, into the 60s, we had the very infamous and industry-changing publishing of Seduction of the Innocent.
Oh, that joke.
Which irreparably changed and also leads into the Comics Code. Because now we've
Yeah,
got to
it
watch
did.
on how close male characters get together. If we got to watch to make sure the comics don't turn the frickin' kids gay.
Yeah. That very event in that book is what sparked the CCA to begin with.
It's come up very briefly in some of our past episodes about, the relationship between Batman and Robin being construed as queer for a very long time, and how that shaped a lot of readers and a lot of anger towards comics, which I think comic books as a target of censorship comes up in part because they're so accessible. I mean, maybe less these days where you have to go to a specific comic shop and kind of have to have some sort of knowledge of what the hell you're walking into. Otherwise, you're going to be very overwhelmed very quickly. But once upon a time, it was you could just pick them up at a newsstand, and comics weren't expensive.
No.
Rising costs of production to compete with each other has created a little bit of a shift in that. But comics used to be for the everyman, used to be easy. And so the idea of them being illicit or full of improper material was scary to people because there are so many readers. Similar accusations of being morally wrong have come up about things like women's pulp romance or just magazines in general.
Yeah, I think it goes beyond just the accessibility in terms of them being cheap, but they're also so able to be in plain sight. And especially like comic books are contemporary, we kind of, as an art form, belittle them and we treat them as being for kids. And like certainly not in the circles of this podcast or probably our audience, but there's a real belief that like comic books have to be for children, so they have to exclusively have child-friendly themes.
Not true always, man. I mean, there is...
not true always,
Yeah.
but there's a
perception.
perception.
You got to take it onto yourself to actually, you know, read the description of what you're about to pick up or what your kid's about to pick up, man. Find out what they're reading, man, before you actually just like say, yeah, okay, just take it and go.
Yeah.
But that's the onus is and should be on the reader. In that case, on the consumer. It's no one's fault if you picked up something that you didn't pay any attention to and then you find the content is unacceptable. That's actually on you for not at least taking a look ahead of time. The modern popularity of content warnings are great for that because you can really just go, if you didn't read the warnings.
Basically, yes.
It falls a little bit to the retailer, too, to go, oh, hey, this is a kid, and this manga is wrapped in plastic, features explicit imagery directly there on the front. And so to age gate things just a little bit, yeah, for sure.
You know, maybe just, I don't know, be a parent. Not hard.
That's
Pay
true.
attention.
100%. Right?
I mean, that's what things like DC's Black Label is for, right? And Vertigo. It's to create a distinction between stuff that's probably okay for your kids to look at, but, you know, take a look, and things your kids probably shouldn't be looking at.
Like Batman's Wang.
Yes.
Oh,
Like Batwing.
the infamous Batwing.
But everything we've talked about so far is so separate from the issue at hand in Tennessee, because what we're talking about is entertainment and what fits into entertainment. This controversy in Tennessee and the way it gets brought up is a parent didn't like that it was being used to teach World War II history, because, spoiler alert, World War II is ugly.
Yeah,
it is disturbing. This book, that through kind of some visual metaphor and through a lot of symbolism, introducing your kid to some very heavy subjects in a highly visual format. It's not for entertainment. This graphic novel does not exist to entertain. It exists to educate. So you're not censoring entertainment, you're censoring education. And those are very different things.
That's exactly it. This is a two-prong discussion. It's one part in hiding the history in which that people have A, the right to know, and B, the censoring of media.
No, I hear that's what's happening right now. I hear they're even cutting out just their own history just to, like, you know, to kind of get away from it now, which is not good because, like, you did a lot of bad to a lot of black people, and so that should be, you know, in your history books, and you're trying to erase that too. You can't do that because your country's literally built off of that.
Yes.
American education system has quite the body record in regards to actually teaching American history. Hell, they think they won the War of 1812. Like,
another reason that this particular book was put on the ban list was because the artist, they went into his history and found that he had done explicit content before.
which is absurd, by the way.
Allow me to just
please.
approach my soapbox for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Then I
Careful on
would
the way
like
up.
everybody to do is go to every copy of Superman anything, the Superman movie even, and take all of them off the shelves too. Because Joe Shuster, co-creator of Superman, did explicit art to survive. And all of the men, if you go look at it, are Clark Kent, and all the women are Lois Lane.
Oh, look at that.
Gotta take commissions, man.
Hey, man, gotta get paid somehow. Gotta eat.
Right?
Yes.
That is not just a 30s problem. We have modern artists. Stefan Sajek, who does a brilliant covers for a lot of DC titles, is most famous for his publication of Sunstone, which is 100% erotic content.
May I throw one in there for you?
Absolutely.
So if this is the case, then all that Bruce Timm stuff that you love, and I mean like the animated series, Batman animated series, Justice League, you could take all that down too if you want, because he's done some explicit art with like Poison Ivy, Catwoman in his early days also.
Did you know that 37% of you aren't subscribed to the channel on YouTube? You can help change that by hitting the subscribe button just below the video. And now back to the show.
That's the discussion of moral purity that's getting, I'm not going to say bigger and bigger because it's been a problem for forever. People getting weird about what is and isn't morally acceptable. But the idea that by doing some sort of obscene, quote unquote, though we could get into a whole discussion on that word if we wanted, but explicit content makes the creator themselves impure and an unreliable source of other content.
Yeah.
It's fucking stupid. Like, obviously there are cases where where, you know, if I find out that someone wrote this white supremacist piece and published it, and then I go, oh no, but I really liked when they wrote this one story, I'm actually going to reread the story I liked and look for themes that might have carried over from one work to the other.
Yeah.
But that's critical thinking.
Oh, right. And the American South doesn't believe in any critical anything.
You went there.
I did.
Yeah.
But fun fact, I learned in some research that Art Spiegelman also was the designer of the Garbage Pail Kids.
Oh, was he now?
Which was like, oh, if you really wanted to point and start to go through an artist history of, okay, that's the norm, let's undo it. Art Spiegelman's your guy. And this reaches all the way back to artists in the 80s. Like, oh, I'm forgetting the beginning of it, but it's The Art of Finland, where men are dressed in BDSM-esque styles with their genitals like overexposed on purpose, pushing against the social norms. And then he was a comic book drawer, and then he went back to do a volume 2.
Shit, why not?
Because A, artists gotta eat, and B, people enjoy it for one way or another.
Yeah.
That's not for a school band to decide.
Exactly. Who are you to perceive what I'm meant to enjoy? It's what I like. I'm part of the audience.
Right. The nitty gritty of this particular ban is that they're saying it's not appropriate for an 8th grade class. Here in Canada, by 8th grade, we have learned some very cold, hard truths about Canadian history.
Yeah.
On the mistreatment of the Aboriginal peoples here.
A little softened for the sake of the children, quote unquote, but
varying strongly by province as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, the first time I heard about the whole smallpox blanket thing was the 6th grade, which for those who aren't familiar with Canadian history was a deliberate and mostly successful genocide by the British using biological warfare.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now imagine, if you will, there was a graphic novel from a first person's perspective of exactly what happened, introducing a subject to you that is cold and awful in all accounts, but in a way that at that point you're used to consuming. And that's
absolutely
kind of the whole thing with comic books, right? To peer through the lens of our reality.
Yeah, and the big one is, while we're still on education as our big point here, censoring education is a fool's fucking errand if you can't do it on a mass scale, because that'll just draw attention to the thing you're trying to hide, and people will find alternative ways to access that material.
The internet.
Exactly. But also, it's the kind of thing that leads to serious societal damage. I mean, we already have an issue with honest-to-God Holocaust deniers. They're out there.
Oh, yeah, they are. Yeah.
And you think reducing the educational material on that horrific event is going to fix that? No, that perpetuates that problem.
Skepticism comes at the moment where you say, oh, I feel like I should have heard about that before.
Yeah, or I know enough.
Yeah.
People
Shit's-
want to stop learning.
You know, let's say shit's slowly becoming V for Vendetta.
And that was the graphic novel that I studied in high school.
Yeah.
And the rise of fascism. Now, it was not framed that way, but once the class I was in started to raise up those questions, my English teacher was very much like, I'm glad you see that, because the curriculum doesn't tell me to point that out to you. But if you're seeing it, congratulations.
Good.
You've seen through the veil.
Fascism is on the rise. Red Skull and Cobra Commander are pleased.
Oh, I hate those guys.
You should. Exactly.
Yeah.
They both have dumb voices.
And silly hats.
They're both terrible men. Jesus. And yet, people seem to listen to them. It's crazy, huh?
Right?
Like, when you look at the content because obviously the people who voted on the Tennessee School Board to have it struck from the curriculum and taken out of the classroom, obviously they weren't talking about it in the context of this depicts World War II. They were finding other things in the text to object to.
Of course they were.
And one of the things so there's a panel that had 2 things against it. The panel itself depicts his mother cutting her wrists in a bathtub. So you've got the female form, also known as the most dangerous thing on the face of the earth. And you've got a depiction of suicide. Both of those, to me, never mind the fact that you should have access to this book as a tool to teach younger audiences about the Holocaust and the Second World War, that is not a bad time to start having conversations about mental health. And that is also, like, just deal with the fact there were boobs present. Just get over it.
I mean,
Don't people have boobies? What can you do about it?
Yes, people...
Also, the art style is what it is. Like,
Yes.
come on, guys.
They're mice.
They're not even human boob.
Yeah.
You're mad at that, but you'll walk with your kid through a museum. No problem. It's fine when Chris Evans pulls off his t-shirt, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's the female presenting nipple that's illegal, don't you know?
Yeah.
I suppose so. I suppose so. Not out in Japan. They do it different out there.
Right. The difference between Eastern censorship, there is none, and Western censorship, where there was a whole lot.
Too much.
This is not the first comic, however, that's been challenged. So what we've done today is we've brought the list, and we're just going to go down a handful of them.
Yeah.
Who would like to start?
I'm here as audience. I'm going to listen to you guys, and I'm going to engage as we go along down the list, man. This is all so weird to me.
Well, I'll begin then. So we begin our list with Amazing Spider-Man Revelations. So, thing with that particular, the reason it was challenged is sexual overtones. This particular volume is also the depiction of 9/11 in the Marvel Universe, in the Marvel 616 universe. And the issue is really neat in the way it portrays the heroes and villains coming together to save people. Because Doom can come after New York all he wants and invade Yancey Street all he wants, but when a terrorist organization does something, now he's got a problem with it. Take that how you will.
Yeah, sure, I guess. All right.
10-4, Captain. No, it's Spider-Man. And I don't care how hot Mary Jane looked on the cover. Come on.
Well, again, the issue being, right, if they wanted to censor it for political content, they would have gotten flack for it, but that would have been the discussion to have. This is a Spider-Man book. It's not like he's got his dick out. Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's not Batwang.
Right?
There's no Batwang here.
Even the book that has a superhero's dick out isn't on this list.
Come on.
Surprisingly. Look at that.
If we're looking at the same list, suspicion, the next entry on it would be The Killing Joke. And I think, look, we've talked that one to death and back. We resurrected it with a Lazarus Pit just to beat it to death again.
Yeah.
But it is a story. And for better or for worse, it's a pretty fucking well done story.
Yeah.
And I believe in the comments or in the description, we'll find the article on how Alan Moore wrote this, put that in, and in the last, I want to say 10 or so years, has gone, hey, listen, now I have a better understanding on how gross that is. I'm sorry.
Oops.
Whoopsie. Do you see what I was trying to do? There was a point here. I did it in a weird way, like a really icky way. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm also going to make a bold statement and say that The Killing Joke is mad overrated. And if anyone wants to argue that, you can fight me in the comments, but it doesn't even crack my top 5 Batman stories, so whatever. It's just a lot of shock value for me.
Fact.
I haven't read it, but I can't imagine what must be in there to get Alan Moore to apologize.
A lot of
holy
shock
shit.
value, yeah. A lot of shock value. I'll tell you that much. Stuff that you're not ready for. Kinda.
Unspeakable things to Barbara Gordon.
Yeah.
I might skip on that.
Yeah, you can.
I would advise watching the movie, but don't watch the movie. You know what? If you're going to
Don't watch that either.
No! What the fuck? Why
Yeah,
would you suggest anyone watch that movie?
why
It's
I backed
terrible.
up.
worse.
That's why I backed up.
That's even worse. All that's garbage, man. And again, it doesn't even crack my top 5. It's not even, they say it's good. Yeah, I see it, but it's not that great.
It's a funky little moral story where you go, oh, the ethics, the morality, though. What the fuck are you doing over there? Anyway, like, it's just a story. Whether you like it or not, it's not a gross depiction that corrupts the youth because it's a thriller for the most part, which means it's meant to be kind of fucked up.
Not that kind of fucked up, but fucked up nonetheless.
No.
Oh, no. It's literally just trying to make a good guy have the worst day of his life, right? Make him try to crack. It's basically Joker shtick in almost everything he does.
But it was really fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Going down the list a little more, we have
The Graveyard Book, which drew my attention mostly because, at least on the list I found, it has the same tags for why it was challenged as Mouse does. But this to me is just a good example of how not every story has the same intent. This is a Neil Gaiman graphic novel based off his book that he obviously did a slightly different storyboard for. This is a whimsical fairy tale in that weird dark way that Neil Gaiman does fairy tales. This is entirely meant to entertain, maybe meant to spook kids a little bit, so whatever uncomfortable feelings the violent imagery creates are intentional or deliberate. Not to say that Mess isn't deliberate. You should be uncomfortable reading that book because it depicts the worst things that humans can do to each other in
fact,
mouse form.
The way that book was initially put out was in like newspaper strips at the back of a different book because it is so graphic and so like hard to swallow. Art Spiegelman knew that oh, I need to release this in pieces.
But the fact that both of these books are allegedly objectionable for the same reason, when they have entirely different intents, entirely different things that they're meant to invoke in the audience in terms of feelings and what you take away from the books, shows to me you can take anything out of context and make it seem terrible.
Right.
You know, you can give a literal description of it's this, this, and this, and be like, well, of course that's not for kids. Don't lose track of intent.
Right.
Don't lose track of authorial authority. As much as we like to pretend death of the author exists, and as much as we like to pretend that once the last keystroke goes, it's out of the author's hands and it's only about what the reader takes away from it, that's crap. You have to understand what the message of the work is. And Mouse has such an important message.
Well, sounds like a complete refusal to engage with the text in any way.
Yes.
It's looking at explicitly the surface level and the shallowest and most convenient interpretation available.
And
It's unwilling and
School board-
uninterested in what the book wants to be.
The school board decision is a decision made by adults who also don't want to engage with this, being like, this makes me uncomfortable, I'm going to protect my kids from it, rather being like, this makes me uncomfortable, and it should. And my kids need to understand how uncomfortable this is.
Hard facts.
Hard facts.
Yep.
I apologize if I'm grandstanding in our recording, you guys.
No, that's
No,
fine.
that's the point.
Listen,
No,
this,
it's okay.
this entire episode is
All right.
soapbox
Your
central.
soapbox is taller. Yeah, your
I
soapbox
get
is taller.
Okay.
It's okay. Go get it, Kenobi.
Further down the list, we have Bone by Jeff Smith.
Oh.
And the reason it was challenged was promotion of smoking and drinking. All right, if I may solo this one for a hot second.
Please do.
This is going to be short and sweet. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
It's Bone. It is, honestly, in my personal opinion, Bone should be everybody's first comic.
Bold.
If you are getting into comic books and you are starting to understand how characters and layouts and all of that are being done, Bone is the starting.
It certainly does that transition to, hey, that's kind of fucked up pretty well.
Right? It was probably one of the first graphic novels I ever read, and also found volume 1 and then kept going and then memorized the order.
Wow.
Because it was 1 through 9 and then Rose, because Rose was a prelude. Luckily, it was just challenged, and then Jeff Smith decried the attempted ban of his book, and it was ultimately rejected. But also, who? Why? They're
goof.
whomst.
If I can throw another Alan Moore work up here, no one will be surprised to hear that people tried to censor Watchmen.
Oh, buddy. I mean, Giant Blue Wang, every page.
Oh boy.
But honestly, that comes back to some of our discussion earlier, that it's just not for kids. It's just an adult comic book.
And also,
Don't let your kids read it.
I
Okay.
definitely believe to fully understand Watchmen, you need to understand comic books first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
Like, Watchmen is a full-on
Commentary.
commentary and breakdown of the superhero genre. If anybody tries to tell you out there in the audience that Watchmen should be your first comic, take your nearest book, your phone, and stuff it in their mouth.
Watchmen's a hard one to digest right away, man.
Also, if anyone tells you that they admire Rorschach, you should probably run away.
A red flag.
It's like someone coming to me and be like, hey, man, I like manga. What should I start? Read Akira.
Do
Start
not
with
read
that.
Akira right off the bat.
Start with that. Okay.
Listen, I'm no manga expert, but even I know that's wrong.
No, but like, again, why Watchmen being Watchmen isn't grounds to make it stop existing. It's just not for everybody.
No, you gotta know your audience. That's an adult audience that's catering to. That's not meant for kids, man.
War on adult content. It's still ongoing, guys. That's
Like I said before, Red Skull and Cobra Commander are pleased.
One of the things about censorship is it really does strive to keep us all as children, uninformed, unengaged, and without agency.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Unquestioning.
Unquestioning.
censorship is just power play. It's just people in power wanting to exert that power on others.
And to deny the acclamation or the acquisition of power by others.
Yeah.
Like, as much as you exert power when you say, okay, I am going to enact a ban on this, that's an exertion of power, but more importantly, that's a prevention of someone else gaining knowledge that could empower.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen when they these parents find out I don't know, Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey are all dating? What are they gonna do then?
Has any parent ever read the last Twilight book?
What's
Oh,
God,
Yeah, Table knows what I'm talking about.
there's so much
I'm
more
not
going on
surprised.
out there right now, other than Mouse, and we're worried about this instead. But all right.
Yeah.
And even though, like, even that, like, those topics aren't even anything to be worried about, honestly. Just know exactly what to give. There's literally a label for kids to read other books within that label. Marvel does have a label for children.
Right.
You can,
and as
you can level
grow
it out.
up, it is, let's put it this way. Comics are for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And there are branches of comics that are for everybody from 5 to 50. And there is a place for you in all of that. However, there's a little bit of like, you shouldn't hand mouse to a 5-year-old. They're not going to get it.
Well, yeah, and that's something that's come out of this is there's been a number of independent distributors who are taking the steps to get these books to students, donate them to students in this particular Tennessee county, McMahon County. But it belongs in a classroom. It belongs with a discussion.
Right.
Yes.
It's not to say that you can't, it's not being taught at my kid's school, I'm going to teach it from home. It's not to say that that isn't a good thing to do. But this is a learning exercise, and the supplementary materials have to go with it. I would argue this book doesn't belong anywhere other than in a classroom.
Yeah.
Maybe I wouldn't argue that. Go ahead and read it on your own, obviously, listeners. I'm not going to say, if someone's not going to, obviously, everybody should experience this. But it will achieve its goals the best if you put it in a classroom.
Yeah, there's some, I don't want to discredit general comic books here, okay? I want to be clear on that. But Mouse is literature.
Yes.
It's very much deeply motivated and dense. And it's supposed to be both read as a whole and deconstructed into its parts and have to examine those parts. And you can do that on your own if you're really into that kind of thing. But you'll get the most out of it through discussion and through engaging with it with others.
Yeah. And I like the way you phrase that because it's not about read this and then listen to your teacher talk to you about it. It's actually engage and address how this story and understanding it as a depiction of real events affects you.
And there are other comic books that are about what you get out of it more than what built them,
Yeah.
But a lot of comics are just entertainment, and there's nothing wrong with just entertainment, and there's nothing wrong with entertainment with themes and messages, and there's nothing wrong with texts that are mostly themes and messages. Again, pick your audience, pick your setting, but none of them should be censored to remove the actual intent of what's being done, and definitely none of them should be out and out banned.
Yeah, I mean, 1984 gets challenged on the sexuality in that book. It's not about the sexuality. Yeah, I mean, how entertaining is 1984? Meh.
Yeah, very meh.
It's a lot better than Gatsby.
Yeah, I give it that. Yeah, I give it that. I get that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, on the list that, again, I think Red and I are both looking at, there is one entry that kind of has grounds to be banned in the way that you go some things, like, I'm not going to stop people from making art, but there's stuff that shouldn't get published because it's just not very good, And this one is a comics zine by a guy by the name of Mike Diana, who just basically made borderline snuff art in his book Boiled Angel. And it was very similar to some actual deaths that had occurred. And while he didn't kill anybody, as far as the courts of law found, he did get charged for obscenity because they were like, hey, that's just fucked up, actually. And, that does get into the grounds of maybe you shouldn't put that out there because that's on the exact opposite end of Mouse. It's making light of real events and it's mistreatment of actual harm that was done.
Yeah.
But that's not about censorship. That's about minding your fucking boundaries.
Again, it gets down to, you made this. Why?
Yeah, what was on your mind? What were you thinking?
I kind of want to leave everybody with the quote from Neil Gaiman when The Sandman was put on the challenged and banned list. I suspect that having a reputation as adult material that's unsuitable for teens will probably do more to get teens to read Sandman than having the book ready and waiting on a YA shelf would ever do. I'm perfectly happy for Sandman to be on adult shelves, and if there aren't any shelves due to fearful or under-budgeted librarians, there's always an interlibrary loan.
Dig it.
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman, as always, with the bangers.
With that in mind, if you want to continue conversations with us upon greater topics, or sometimes you just want to talk Batman with us, you can find us on Twitter at Crusade Nerd. You can find us on Instagram at Nerd Crusade. You can find our sister show, the Itty Bitty Nerdy Committee, on twitch.tv/Nerd Crusade at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.
And until next time, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, and that's to be continued.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, go ahead and button mash a thumbs up. If you want to swing by when we have a new video, web up the sub button. Oh, and while you're at it, hit the bell to be notified by.